Are you even qualified to teach here? The question, sharp and cold as a winter wind, sliced through the air, followed by a low, rumbling murmur of agreement from the sharply dressed parents arrayed before me. I, Sophia Santiago, stood rooted to the spot at the front of the classroom, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. My first parent-teacher meeting at St. Hillcrest Academy, and it felt less like a welcoming and more like an inquisition. I'd anticipated butterflies, the nervous flutter of a new beginning, but this was a cold, hard judgment, a wall of suspicion built brick by brick with prejudice. The man who'd spoken, a titan in a tailored suit, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his gaze a laser beam, dissecting me, assessing my worth. "I mean no offense," he began, the words dripping with a condescension that was far more offensive than any outright insult, "but this isn't some local school. Our children deserve the very best." My smile felt plastered on, a fragile mask barely concealing the turmoil within. "Stay calm, Sophia. Stay professional." My fingers tightened around the edges of my blazer, the smooth fabric a small comfort. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the knot of dread twisting in my stomach. "My name is Sophia Santiago, and I'm honored to be your children's teacher this year. Education is my passion, my life's." A woman near the back, her face a study in carefully crafted disdain, raised a manicured hand, cutting me off mid-sentence. "Sorry, but, where exactly did you say you're from?" Her tone was a silken trap, laced with a thinly veiled contempt that made my skin crawl. I hesitated, just a fraction of a second, a beat too long. The silence stretched, taut and expectant. "I'm from the Philippines," I answered, the words feeling strangely small, inadequate in the face of their scrutiny. "I've been teaching for over 7 years. "Well," the woman interrupted again, turning to the parent beside her with a smirk that felt like a slap. "I guess this is diverse hiring in action." Laughter rippled through the room, a cruel, spreading wildfire, consuming the oxygen, leaving me gasping for air. My cheeks burned, a flush of shame and anger rising from my neck. I gripped the lesson plans in my hands, the crisp paper edges digging into my palms, plans I'd painstakingly crafted, staying up late, fueled by coffee and the burning desire to prove myself. "Do they even have schools like this there?" a father muttered, his voice low but audible, earning another wave of derisive chuckles. The weight of their stares, their unspoken accusations, felt suffocating, a physical pressure bearing down on me. But I refused to break. "You've faced harder battles than this, Sophia," I reminded myself, the image of my grandmother, Lola Pilar, flashing before my eyes, her wrinkled face, her kind eyes, her unwavering belief in me. The whispers continued, the laughter a constant, stinging hum, each word a tiny dagger aimed at my heart. But instead of retreating, I straightened my shoulders, lifting my chin. My voice, when I spoke again, was firm, a bedrock of resolve amidst the storm. The echoes of that humiliating meeting still reverberated in my ears as I sat alone in the empty classroom, hours later. The colorful posters I'd so meticulously put up, filled with inspiring quotes and vibrant images, now seemed almost mocking in their cheerful simplicity. I took a deep breath, the stale, recycled air doing little to soothe the ache in my chest. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes, letting the memories wash over me. This wasn't just a job, it was a sacred promise. I grew up in a small barangay in the Philippines, where electricity was a fickle friend, and our classroom was a humble structure of wooden planks and open windows, letting in the scorching tropical sun and the scent of jasmine and damp earth. But my Lola Pilar, my ailing but fiercely strong grandmother, always told me, "Education is the key, Sophia. No matter how poor we are, no one can take knowledge away from you." Lola Pilar was my anchor, my guiding star. I could still picture her, hunched over a rickety table under the dim, flickering glow of an old kerosene lamp, painstakingly teaching me to read English words from a tattered book borrowed from the village library. The smell of kerosene and old paper, a scent forever intertwined with learning and love. "Sophia, Sophia," she'd whisper, her voice raspy but filled with hope, "one day, you'll teach others, just like I'm teaching you. You'll open their minds, light their way." When I graduated valedictorian of my high school, it was Lola Pilar who sold our only goat, our meager source of milk, to pay for my first semester in college. And it was Lola Pilar who never got to see me finish. She passed away during my second year, leaving me a final message, scribbled on a piece of brown paper. The ink faded but the words etched in my heart, do what I never could. Change lives. That memory, that promise, was the fuel that had propelled me through the toughest of days, the months of homesickness, the bone-deep exhaustion of working 2 jobs to make ends meet, the countless nights spent studying, poring over textbooks, driven by the unwavering desire to be more than just good, to be extraordinary. And now, here I was, standing in one of the most prestigious schools in the state, yet tonight had served as a brutal reminder that to some, I would always be an outsider, a foreigner, someone who didn't belong. The classroom door creaked open, startling me. I jolted upright, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Mr. Reyes, the school's janitor, an elderly man with kind eyes and a warm smile. He carried a mop and bucket, but paused when he saw me sitting at my desk, my face undoubtedly reflecting the turmoil within. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked gently, his Filipino accent thick, a familiar comfort in this alien landscape. I managed a weak smile. "Just thinking." Mr. Reyes nodded knowingly, his eyes filled with a wisdom that transcended words. "Don't let them get to you. People like that, they don't see the whole story." He gestured with his chin towards the brightly decorated classroom walls. "But these kids, they'll see it. They'll feel it." His words struck a chord, a resonant note of truth in the cacophony of doubt. My fight wasn't for the approval of those jaded parents, it was for the students who sat in those chairs every day, waiting for someone to believe in them, to ignite their curiosity, to show them the boundless possibilities that lay within. "Thank you, Mr. Reyes," I said softly, the gratitude genuine and heartfelt. He gave me a small, knowing smile and left, the rhythmic swish of his mop down the hallway fading into the quiet of the night. I sat for a moment longer, the weight on my chest feeling a little lighter, the embers of hope rekindled. I looked at the whiteboard, still filled with notes from today's lesson, a vibrant exploration of ancient civilizations, a journey through time and cultures. Tomorrow was another day, another opportunity to prove that I belonged here, not just for myself, but for every child I'd promised to inspire, for every life I was determined to touch. It was a heavy burden, yes, but one I carried with a renewed sense of purpose, a fierce determination forged in the fires of adversity. This wasn't just about teaching, it was about justice, about fairness, about proving that background didn't dictate destiny. The following week, the parent-teacher meeting buzzed in my mind like a persistent, irritating mosquito. I'd resolved to focus on my work, pouring my heart and soul into lesson plans, finding creative and engaging ways to connect with my students. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before the parents' doubts resurfaced, like a dormant volcano threatening to erupt. And I didn't have to wait long. It was Friday afternoon, and I'd just wrapped up my final class for the day. As I organized my desk, a sharp knock at the door startled me. I turned to see 3 parents standing in the doorway, their faces set with a grim purpose that sent a shiver of apprehension down my spine. Among them was Mrs. Halstead, the woman who'd so pointedly questioned my qualifications at the meeting, her designer handbag a symbol of the privilege and power she wielded. "Miss Santiago," Mrs. Halstead said, stepping forward without waiting for an invitation, her voice clipped and formal. "We need to talk." I stood, gesturing towards the chairs in front of my desk, my voice calm, despite the knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. "Of course. Please, have a seat." They didn't sit. Instead, they spread out in front of my desk, forming a small, intimidating tribunal. Mrs. Halstead folded her arms, her expensive bag dangling from her elbow like a weapon. "We've been discussing the curriculum," she began, her tone laced with disapproval, "and frankly, we're concerned." I clasped my hands together, maintaining a steady posture, my gaze unwavering. "I'm happy to address any concerns you have. What specifically would you like to discuss?" A tall man with silver hair, Mr. Prescott, spoke next, his voice a low rumble. "It's not just about the curriculum, Miss Santiago. It's about the way you're teaching it. My daughter said you've been using unconventional methods. Group discussions. Storytelling. She needs structure, not experiments. I nodded slowly, choosing my words carefully. Group discussions and storytelling are proven techniques to help students retain information and build critical thinking skills. I've seen great results with these methods in the past. Mrs. Halstead scoffed, the sound sharp and dismissive. Results? We're not interested in experiments, Miss Santiago. We didn't enroll our children in this school to be your test subjects. My patience wavered, a flicker of anger igniting within me, but I forced myself to remain calm, to maintain a professional demeanor. I assure you, these methods are widely respected in education, and I always base my lessons on the curriculum standards. Another parent, Mrs. Cunningham, chimed in, her tone sharper, more accusatory than the others. It's not just the teaching methods, Miss Santiago. It's, well, let's be honest. We feel you don't quite understand what's expected at a school like this. Do you really think you're prepared for this level of excellence? The words hung in the air, a suffocating cloud of judgment, heavy and oppressive. My chest tightened, a familiar wave of frustration threatening to overwhelm me, but I refused to let my emotions show. I looked each parent in the eye, my voice steady and resolute as I replied. I understand your concerns, and I appreciate your feedback, I began, my voice calm but firm. But I'd like to remind you that I was hired because I met the qualifications and exceeded the expectations of this school. My methods might be different, but they are intentional and rooted in years of experience. Mrs. Halstead raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her skepticism palpable. Experience in schools like this? Or just, elsewhere? The implication was clear, a thinly veiled jab at my background, my origins. My resolve hardened, a steel core forming within me. My experience spans 2 countries, multiple schools, and hundreds of students, I replied, my voice unwavering. And while I may come from a different background, I believe that diversity enriches education. Your children benefit from being exposed to different perspectives, different ways of thinking. Mr. Prescott's frown deepened, his lips forming a thin, disapproving line. That's all well and good, Miss Santiago, but this isn't about diversity. It's about standards. We don't want our children falling behind because you're adjusting. I took a deep breath, my hands gripping the edge of my desk, the smooth wood a grounding force. With all due respect, I said, my voice rising slightly, I'm here because I'm passionate about helping your children succeed. My methods are not an adjustment, they are tools to ensure that every child has a chance to excel. Education isn't just about grades, it's about building confidence, curiosity, and character. Mrs. Cunningham's lips thinned, her expression hardening. Confidence doesn't get them into Ivy League schools, Miss Santiago. For a moment, the room was silent, the tension so thick it was almost tangible, a palpable force pressing down on us. I felt my pulse pounding in my ears, a frantic rhythm of defiance, but I refused to back down. Perhaps not, I said finally, my voice soft but firm, my gaze unwavering. But confidence does teach them how to face challenges, how to think critically, and how to lead. And that's what will make them truly successful, both in school and in life. The parents exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of irritation and a flicker of uncertainty. They had expected me to falter, to apologize, to backtrack. Instead, I stood before them, unwavering, my quiet strength a more powerful force than their collective doubts. Mrs. Halstead cleared her throat, clearly unsatisfied. We'll see about that. With that, the parents turned and left, their footsteps echoing down the hallway, a fading drumbeat of their disapproval. I let out a shaky breath and sank into my chair, feeling drained but strangely resolute. They could doubt me all they wanted, but I wasn't here for their approval. I was here for my students, for the promise I'd made to Lola Pilar, and I wasn't going to let anyone, anything, take that away from me. Monday morning arrived with an unusual energy buzzing in the air, a palpable sense of anticipation. I stood at the front of my classroom, going over the day's lesson plan, a lively discussion about the impact of globalization on different cultures. The students were particularly animated, chatting excitedly about their weekends and occasionally glancing at me with shy smiles. Despite the ongoing tension with the parents, my students had been nothing but kind, engaged, and eager to learn. It was a constant reminder of why I loved teaching, why I'd poured my heart and soul into this profession. But just as the class settled into a quiet rhythm, I noticed a familiar figure lingering near the classroom door. It was Mrs. Halstead, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Behind her stood Mrs. Cunningham and Mr. Prescott, their postures stiff with a barely concealed frustration that sent a fresh wave of apprehension through me. I knew, with a sinking feeling in my stomach, that this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. "Class, please continue your group activity," I said, my voice calm and reassuring, a practiced smile masking my inner turmoil. I stepped towards the door, motioning for the parents to follow me outside into the hallway. Once the door was closed, creating a small, private space, Mrs. Halstead wasted no time. "We've spoken with the school board about your teaching methods, Miss Santiago," she began, her voice sharp and accusatory. I tilted my head slightly, maintaining eye contact. "I see. And what did they say?" Mrs. Cunningham folded her arms, her expression grim. "They said your approach is unconventional. But they're willing to give you time to prove yourself." "That's generous," Mr. Prescott added, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "But we're not willing to wait around while our children's futures are at stake." I took a steadying breath, forcing myself to remain calm, to meet their hostility with a quiet strength. "I understand your concerns, and I respect your passion for your children's education," I said, my voice even and measured. "But with all due respect, I think there's something important we're overlooking." "And what's that?" Mrs. Halstead asked, her tone laced with skepticism, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Your children," I said, my voice steady but warm, filled with a genuine concern that I hoped would reach them. "Have any of you asked them how they feel about what we're doing in the classroom?" The question hung in the air for a moment, a pregnant pause filled with unspoken tension. The parents exchanged glances, their carefully constructed wall of confidence faltering slightly. "They've said they're confused," Mrs. Cunningham replied quickly, her voice defensive. "Your methods aren't what they're used to." I nodded, acknowledging her point. "Change can feel confusing at first," I agreed. "But that's how growth begins. Let me give you an example." I gestured towards the classroom window, where the students were actively working together on a group project, their faces animated with engagement and collaboration. "Last week, I gave the class an assignment to write a collaborative story. At first, many of them struggled. They weren't used to sharing ideas, to working as a team. But by the end of the project, they had created something truly amazing, something they were incredibly proud of, not just of the work itself, but of their ability to collaborate, to overcome challenges, to create something together." I turned back to the parents, my gaze unwavering, my voice filled with conviction. "My goal isn't just to prepare your children for tests," I continued. "It's to prepare them for life, to teach them how to think critically, how to work with others, how to solve problems creatively. These are the skills that will help them succeed, no matter where they go, no matter what challenges they face." The parents stood silent for a moment, their expressions shifting, a flicker of doubt creeping into their stern facades. Finally, Mrs. Halstead broke the silence. "That sounds nice in theory," she admitted, her voice softer than before, a hint of uncertainty creeping in. "But we're paying for results, Miss Santiago, not experiments." I smiled faintly, a gentle understanding softening my features. "I understand," I said. "But I think results are about more than just numbers. They're about the kind of people your children become." "And what if your approach doesn't work?" Mr. Prescott challenged, his voice still skeptical, but a little less harsh. My voice softened, but my conviction remained firm, unwavering. "Then I'll take full responsibility," I said. "But I believe in what I'm doing. And more importantly, I believe in your children." The hallway grew quiet, the tension slowly dissipating, like fog lifting under the morning sun. For the first time I saw a flicker of doubt in the parents' stern expressions, not doubt in me, but doubt in their own judgments, their own preconceived notions. I'll keep you updated on their progress, I added, offering a gesture of goodwill. And if you have any specific concerns, I'm always happy to address them. Mrs. Cunningham opened her mouth to speak, but then stopped herself, her lips pressing together in a thin line. Instead, she nodded curtly. We'll hold you to that. With that, the parents turned and walked away, their footsteps echoing softly down the hall, a much less forceful sound than before. I watched them leave, my heart steady, my resolve strengthened. I knew this battle wasn't over, but it was a step in the right direction, a small victory in a larger war. And small victories, I'd learned, were what truly mattered. They were the building blocks of trust, the foundation of understanding, the seeds of change. I turned back to my classroom, where my students were still busy collaborating on their projects, their faces alight with enthusiasm and the joy of learning. My resolve grew stronger, my heart swelling with a renewed sense of purpose. No matter how hard the journey, no matter how fierce the opposition, I wasn't just here to teach, I was here to inspire, to empower, to make a difference. And that, I knew, was a battle worth fighting. A week later, I was tidying up my desk after school, the setting sun casting long shadows across the empty classroom. A soft knock at the door made me look up. I saw a figure standing hesitantly in the doorway, silhouetted against the fading light. It was Mrs. Halstead. But this time, her demeanor was entirely different. She wasn't flanked by the other parents, and her expression wasn't cold or judgmental. In fact, she looked unsure, almost vulnerable. Miss Santiago, Mrs. Halstead began, stepping inside, her voice hesitant. Do you have a moment? I put down the stack of papers I was holding and gestured towards a chair, my heart filled with a mix of apprehension and hope. Of course. Please, come in. Mrs. Halstead sat down slowly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. For a moment, she didn't say anything, her gaze fixed on the corner of my desk, her expression troubled. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, more subdued than I'd ever heard it. I owe you an apology, she said, her words measured, her voice tinged with regret. I've been harsh. Judgmental, even. And it wasn't fair. I blinked, caught off guard by her unexpected admission. Thank you for saying that. Mrs. Halstead sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. The truth is, my son has been coming home every day, talking about your class. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then, well, he said something last night that stuck with me. I leaned forward slightly, my curiosity piqued, my heart filled with a growing sense of anticipation. What did he say? He told me, he finally understands why school matters, Mrs. Halstead said, her voice cracking just a little, a hint of emotion breaking through her carefully constructed facade. He said you make learning feel important. Like it's not just about grades, but about who he is as a person. My chest tightened with emotion, a warmth spreading through me, but I kept my composure, my voice calm and reassuring. I'm glad he feels that way. That's always been my goal. Mrs. Halstead nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I think I'd been so focused on getting him into the right schools, on setting him up for the right future, that I forgot what education is really supposed to be about. I let my own insecurities, my own fears, cloud my judgment. She paused, her voice growing softer, more vulnerable. I grew up in a family where success was everything. And failure, it wasn't an option. I guess I pushed that onto my son, without even realizing it. But seeing how much he's thriving in your class, it's made me question a lot of things. I let the words settle between us for a moment, the silence filled with a shared understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of the complexities of parenthood, of the burdens we carry, the mistakes we make. It's not easy, being a parent, I said finally, my voice gentle and compassionate. You want the best for your child, and sometimes, that means protecting them from what you think might hurt them. But growth often comes from facing challenges, from learning to see the world through a wider lens. Mrs. Halstead nodded slowly, her gaze meeting mine, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "You're right," she said, her voice firm. "And I want to thank you for helping me see that." For the first time, I saw a vulnerability in the woman that hadn't been there before. It wasn't the polished, confident exterior she'd shown during our previous encounters. This was a mother who loved her child deeply, and who was starting to realize that love didn't always mean control, that sometimes it meant letting go, trusting, allowing them to find their own path. "I'm going to talk to the other parents," Mrs. Halstead said after a moment, her voice filled with a newfound determination. "They need to hear this, too, about the way their children are growing under your care. They might not all see it yet, but I think they will." I smiled gently, my heart filled with a quiet sense of gratitude. "Thank you. That means a lot." As Mrs. Halstead stood to leave, she paused at the door, turning back to face me, her expression sincere. "You're a remarkable teacher, Miss Santiago," she said, her voice filled with a genuine warmth that I hadn't heard before. "And I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." I watched her go, a wave of relief washing over me, a sense of peace settling in my heart. It wasn't just about earning the parents' trust, it was about building bridges, one step at a time, one conversation at a time. And with every small victory like this, I felt more certain, more confident, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. When I turned back to my desk, my eyes fell on the photo of Lola Pilar that I kept tucked into my planner, a constant reminder of my roots, my purpose. I reached out and gently touched the edge of the frame, my voice a soft whisper, filled with love and gratitude. "We're doing it, Lola. We're really doing it." The shift in the school's atmosphere didn't happen overnight, like a sudden burst of sunlight after a storm. It was more gradual, a slow, steady blossoming, like a garden coming to life in the spring. But it was undeniable. I started to notice small but significant changes in the way my students interacted, not just with me, but with each other. Students who were once hesitant, reluctant to participate, now eagerly raised their hands, sharing their ideas without fear of making mistakes, their voices filled with a newfound confidence. Shy kids, who had once blended into the background, found their voices during group projects, their contributions valued, their perspectives respected. And even those who had initially struggled with the material began showing signs of growth, their understanding deepening, their enthusiasm growing. It wasn't perfect, progress never is. There were still moments of frustration, setbacks, challenges to overcome. But it was steady, and it was beautiful, a testament to the power of connection, of empathy, of believing in the potential of every child. One afternoon, I was walking through the school hallway, the sounds of laughter and chatter filling the air. As I passed a group of parents waiting by the lockers, I overheard a conversation that made me pause, a smile spreading across my face. "You know," one parent said, her tone lighter, more relaxed than I'd expected, "I thought Miss Santiago's methods were unorthodox, to say the least. But my daughter's grades are up, and she actually enjoys school now." The other parent nodded in agreement. "Same with my son. He's been talking about her lessons all week. Yesterday, he told me a story about a Filipino folktale she shared in class. He said it made him think about how different cultures have their own wisdom, their own unique perspectives." I smiled to myself and continued walking, my heart swelling with a quiet pride. I didn't need to stop and join the conversation, just hearing it was enough, a validation of the work I was doing, a confirmation that the ripple effect was spreading. But the ripple effect didn't stop with the parents. One by one, students started to share their experiences with me outside of class, during lunch breaks and after school. They'd approach me with their questions, their thoughts, and sometimes, even their fears, their vulnerability a testament to the trust we'd built. "Miss Santiago," one student said shyly, after class one day, her eyes filled with a newfound confidence, "can I tell you something? I used to hate history. But the way you teach it, it feels alive. Like it's not just about dates and names, but about people, about their stories." Another student chimed in, his voice filled with pride. "My dad said your class reminds him of when he was a kid, back in Mexico. He said you make him proud of where he came from." My heart swelled with a profound sense of fulfillment. I wasn't just teaching lessons, I was building connections, bridges between cultures, between generations, and between people who might have never understood each other otherwise. But the real turning point, the moment that solidified the transformation, came during a school-wide event in early spring. The administration had organized a showcase, a celebration of student achievement, where students could present projects they'd worked on throughout the semester. Each class had a table to display their work, but my students had decided to go all out, to create something truly special. They presented a collaborative project called Threads of the World, a tapestry of stories, traditions, and historical events from different cultures, all woven together to show how interconnected humanity truly is. Students proudly explained their individual contributions to passing parents, teachers, and even the school principal, their voices filled with confidence, their faces beaming with pride. I stood back, watching my students with a sense of awe, my heart overflowing with gratitude. I could see the confidence in their voices, the pride in their faces, the genuine joy of learning and sharing. Parents who had once been skeptical, who had doubted my methods and my qualifications, now leaned in, asking questions, listening intently, nodding with approval. Mrs. Cunningham, who had once been one of my harshest critics, approached me near the end of the event, her expression unreadable. But as she stopped in front of me, something shifted, a subtle softening in her features. "This is impressive," she admitted, her voice softer, more genuine than I'd ever heard it. "I didn't expect this." I smiled graciously, my voice calm and respectful. "The students did all the hard work. They've grown so much." Mrs. Cunningham hesitated, then added, her voice filled with a newfound respect. "I can see that. And I can see why you believe in what you do." "I was wrong about you, Miss Santiago." My chest tightened with a mix of relief and gratitude, but I kept my tone even, my voice steady. "Thank you. That means a lot." The principal, who had been observing the event from across the room, approached me with a wide smile, his eyes filled with admiration. "Miss Santiago," he said, his voice filled with genuine enthusiasm, "this project is extraordinary. Your students have truly outdone themselves." "It's all thanks to them," I replied modestly, my voice filled with pride. "I just gave them the space to shine, to explore, to create." The principal nodded, his smile unwavering. "Whatever you're doing, Miss Santiago, keep doing it. It's making a real difference." As the event wound down, I helped my students pack up their materials, the air buzzing with excitement and a sense of accomplishment. The parents lingered, many of them approaching me to offer kind words, expressions of gratitude, and even apologies. One by one, they began to see me not as an outsider, not as a threat, but as someone who genuinely cared about their children, about their futures. I walked home that evening, the setting sun casting a warm, golden glow over the city, a lightness in my step that I hadn't felt in weeks. The ripple effect was real, and it was growing stronger every day. My students were thriving, their parents were beginning to trust me, and the school was finally seeing me for who I truly was, not just a teacher, but a guide, a mentor, a bridge between worlds. The soft hum of excited chatter filled the school's auditorium as parents, teachers, and students gathered for the end-of-year appreciation ceremony. I stood near the back of the room, blending into the crowd, content to be a silent observer. I hadn't expected anything special that day. This event was typically about celebrating the students' achievements, and I was just happy to be a part of their journey, to witness their growth and success. As the principal took the stage, the room quieted, the anticipation palpable. He gave a warm, heartfelt speech about the school year, praising the students for their hard work, their resilience, their growth. Then, to my complete surprise, he cleared his throat and said, "Before we conclude, we'd like to take a moment to recognize someone who has had an extraordinary impact on our school this year." I froze, my heart skipping a beat, a wave of disbelief washing over me. The principal smiled, his gaze turning in my direction. "Miss Sophia Santiago, would you please join us on stage?" The crowd erupted into applause, a wave of sound that washed over me, as I hesitated, my cheeks burning with a mix of surprise and embarrassment. Slowly, I made my way to the stage, my legs feeling like jelly, my heart racing. The spotlight felt blinding as I stood next to the principal, my senses overwhelmed by the sudden attention. This year, the principal continued, his voice filled with genuine warmth and appreciation, Miss Santiago has shown us all the true meaning of dedication, resilience, and heart. She came to us with fresh ideas, a deep passion for education, and a remarkable ability to inspire, not only her students, but all of us. He gestured towards the side of the stage, and I gasped softly as my entire class walked out, each holding a piece of paper, their faces beaming with pride and affection. One by one, the students stepped forward, reading heartfelt letters they had written to me, their voices trembling with emotion, their words filled with gratitude and love. Miss Santiago, you taught me to believe in myself, one student said, her voice choked with emotion. Thank you for making history my favorite subject, another added, beaming. You showed me that it's okay to make mistakes, as long as I keep trying, said a boy who had once struggled with confidence, his voice now strong and clear. Tears welled in my eyes as I listened to their words, my heart overflowing with emotion. I tried to blink them away, but they spilled over anyway, streaking my cheeks as I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reflected the joy and gratitude I felt. The last student stepped forward and held up a large piece of poster board. On it was a beautifully hand-drawn banner that read, "Thank you, Miss Santiago, for helping us grow." The applause swelled, a wave of sound that washed over me, enveloping me in a warm embrace of appreciation and love. I brought my hand to my mouth, overwhelmed by the outpouring of gratitude, my heart filled with a profound sense of fulfillment. But the surprises weren't over. Mrs. Halstead, Mrs. Cunningham, and Mr. Prescott, the parents who had once been my harshest critics, stood and approached the stage. In Mrs. Halstead's hands was an envelope. She stepped up and handed it to me, her expression soft, her eyes filled with a genuine warmth. "This is from all of us," she said, her voice gentle but sincere. "A small token of our appreciation." I opened the envelope with shaking hands, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside was a beautifully crafted letter, signed by all the parents in my class. The message read, "Dear Miss Santiago, we came to you with doubts, with skepticism, with preconceived notions. But you showed us what true dedication, passion, and heart look like. You've not only inspired our children, but reminded us of the values that truly matter, kindness, empathy, resilience, and the unwavering belief in the potential of every single student. Thank you for your patience, your understanding, and your unwavering commitment to our children's growth. You've changed our lives, more than you know." I pressed the letter to my chest, overcome with emotion, my eyes welling up with tears of gratitude and joy. "Thank you," I said, my voice cracking, my words inadequate to express the depth of my feelings. "This means more to me than I can ever put into words." The principal leaned into the microphone, his voice filled with warmth and respect. "Miss Santiago, we're honored to have you as part of our school. And now, we'd like to give you a proper round of applause." The room erupted into a standing ovation, a wave of sound and energy that washed over me, enveloping me in a warm embrace of appreciation and love. I looked out at the sea of smiling faces, my students, their parents, my colleagues, and felt a deep, profound sense of belonging, of purpose, of fulfillment. This wasn't just a job, this was my calling, my passion, my life's work. Later that night, as I walked home, the letter clutched tightly in my hand, the warmth of the applause still echoing in my ears, I thought of my Lola Pilar. I looked up at the vast, starlit sky, the same stars that had shone down on our little barangay in the Philippines, the same stars that had witnessed my grandmother's unwavering belief in the power of education. I spoke softly, my voice a quiet whisper carried on the gentle breeze, a message sent across time and space. "We did it, Lola," I murmured, a tear tracing a path down my cheek. "We really did it." The soft glow of the streetlights illuminated my path, but it wasn't the light from above that guided me, it was the light within me, the unwavering belief that teaching wasn't just about imparting knowledge, about filling minds with facts and figures. It was about transforming lives, one heart, one mind, one student at a time. It was about building bridges of understanding, fostering empathy, and igniting a lifelong passion for learning. It was about showing the world that where you came from didn't define where you could go, that diversity was a strength, not a weakness, and that every child, regardless of their background, deserved a chance to shine. And as I walked, I reflected on the journey, on the challenges I'd faced, the doubts I'd overcome, the prejudices I'd confronted. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Every small victory, every moment of connection, every student who had blossomed under my care, had reinforced my belief in the transformative power of education. I thought of the students who had once been hesitant, now confident and eager to learn. I thought of the parents who had once been skeptical, now my allies, their hearts opened by the growth they'd witnessed in their children. I thought of the community that had embraced me, that had finally seen me for who I truly was, not an outsider, but a dedicated educator, a passionate advocate for their children's futures. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that this was just the beginning. There would be new challenges, new obstacles to overcome, new battles to fight. But I was ready. I was armed with the lessons I'd learned, the love I'd received, and the unwavering belief in the power of education to change the world. The story of Sophia Santiago, the teacher from a small barangay in the Philippines who dared to dream big, who dared to challenge the status quo, who dared to believe in the potential of every child, was a story that needed to be shared. It was a story of resilience, of perseverance, of the transformative power of love and dedication. It was a story that reminded us that even in the face of adversity, even when the odds seemed insurmountable, one person, armed with passion and a belief in something greater than themselves, could make a profound difference. And so, I decided to share my story, not for personal recognition, but to inspire others, to encourage those who might be facing similar challenges, to remind them that they were not alone, that their dreams were valid, that their voices mattered. I started small, sharing my experiences with other teachers, with aspiring educators, with anyone who would listen. I spoke at conferences, I wrote articles, I shared my story on social media. And slowly, but surely, the message began to spread. I received messages from teachers around the world, thanking me for inspiring them, for giving them hope, for reminding them of the profound impact they could have on their students' lives. I heard from students who had been touched by my story, who had been inspired to pursue their own dreams, to overcome their own challenges. And I realized that my journey, my struggles, my victories, had resonated with so many others, that the ripple effect I'd witnessed in my own classroom was now spreading far beyond the walls of St. Hillcrest Academy. The core message of my story, the lesson I wanted to share with the world, was simple but profound. Education is not just about acquiring knowledge, it's about empowering individuals, transforming communities, and building a better future for all. It's about recognizing the inherent worth and potential of every child, regardless of their background, their circumstances, or their perceived limitations. It's about fostering empathy, understanding, and respect for diverse cultures and perspectives. It's about creating a learning environment where every student feels safe, valued, and empowered to reach their full potential. And it's about remembering that teaching is not just a profession, it's a calling, a sacred responsibility, a privilege that comes with the power to shape lives, to inspire dreams, and to change the world, one student at a time. So, if you've ever had a teacher who changed your life, who believed in you when no one else did, who inspired you to reach for your dreams, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with a teacher who is struggling, with a student who is doubting themselves, with anyone who needs a reminder of the transformative power of education. And let us know in the comments, what's a lesson from a teacher that you'll never forget? What's a moment in your education that shaped who you are today? Because every story matters, every voice deserves to be heard, and every act of kindness, every moment of inspiration, can create a ripple effect that changes the world in ways we can't even imagine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more heartwarming stories, more inspiring messages, more reminders of the power of human connection and the enduring hope that lies within us all. Because together, we can build a brighter future, one story, one lesson, one life at a time. The power to shape the future isn't found just in grand gestures, but in the quiet, consistent acts of caring, believing, and inspiring. And that, ultimately, is what Sophia Santiago's story is all about.